what emerges in your book very clearly is President Karzai also seeing Pakistan as the key problem. Now, there's a separate chapter in the book on Pakistan, and I know a number of people in my part of the world would be very interested in hearing you speak a little bit about that. You speak about going to Pakistan and having to deal with some very hostile questions, and then you say in a moment of absolute candor and bluntness that A, elements of the ISI, the intelligence services, are linked to the Al-Qaeda and the Taliban, and B, you speak about how someone in the Pakistani security establishment has to be in on the knowledge of safe havens for these terrorists.
Yes.
Do you believe that the United States failed, in a sense, to get Pakistan to clean up its act?
I do hope a lot of thoughtful people in India will read my book and particularly read these chapters about the region that we're talking about, because it is a view that I adopted. Here's where I end up. I think that the civilian government, the Zardari government, which was the first civilian government to be elected that ever got to complete its term, which was for Pakistan an accomplishment in their democratic evolution, did not know what the connections were between elements within the military and the ISI and various extremist and even terrorist groups. I think that the elements within the ISI and the military, both past and present at the time I was dealing with it, were under the mistaken view that having these kinds of proxies vis-a-vis India, vis-a-vis Afghanistan, were in Pakistan's interests. Not just the military's interests, but in their sovereign interests. As I say in the book, it's like keeping poisonous snakes in your backyard, expecting they will only bite your neighbor. And what we're seeing now is the continuing threat to the state of Pakistan by these very same elements. And my argument to my Pakistani counterparts from the very beginning of my term was that they had to take seriously this threat, and they had to do everything they could to end the relationships that existed between the military and the intelligence services with these groups, and they had to try to end their dangerous behavior both inside of Pakistan, across the border in Afghanistan, and obviously, from my perspective, vis-a-vis India. I also write how when I was in India after the attack in Mumbai, I was very struck how the then government said it was very difficult to exercise restraint.
That if this happened again, that's what you say in the beginning, that if this happened again, all bets are off.
That is, and I don't think any government could say anything different.
How did you respond when Sonia Gandhi and Manmohan Singh conveyed this to you?
That I understood it. I thanked them for the restraint that they did show because, as I said, I believe this is an element within the military intelligence institutional base, but that the civilian government was not involved. And I thought it was important to show restraint because Zardari's wife had been killed. Benazir Bhutto had been killed by parts of this conspiracy or this coalition. But I think no country can turn away from that kind of attack continuously. So I did understand, and that's why I put it in the book, because I totally see why. But with Pakistan, for me, Pakistan is a conundrum, because among the people I dealt with, the educated members of the civilian government, even those at the top of the military and the intelligence establishment, they express so many of the same views that I hear in India, for example. I mean, you both stare at each other across that border and are rightfully, because of your histories, concerned. But you go a little bit deeper and you find all kinds of groups that are thriving, either because of support from the military intelligence side or indifference. And by that I mean that a lot of the attacks until fairly recently were in parts of the country that were not of direct concern
To Pakistan itself.
To Pakistan itself.
Yeah.
To neither the political, military, or business elite. That happened somewhere up by the Afghan border. And then all of a sudden, you start to see those groups moving closer into the Swat Valley. We've just seen the attacks in Karachi. And I don't see how Pakistan can ignore this much longer. Their idea that they have these groups to provide strategic depth, as they like to say, vis-a-vis Afghanistan or vis-a-vis India, I think if that were ever true, which I doubt, but if that were ever true, it no longer is. And whether Pakistan can make a decision that includes all the various power sources inside the state to once and for all go after extremists, shut down their training camps, their safe havens, their, madrasas that are inculcating suicide bombing behavior, and begin to have a different view of themselves in the future. That's the question they face.
When we met last, when you were in India, you spoke about how you had actually announced this $10 million bounty for information leading to the arrest of one of the architects of 2611, Hafiz Saeed of the Lashkar-e-Taiba. He's still out there. He's still out there. He holds rallies. Nobody can touch him. Why do you think that someone as powerful as yourself was not able to do more about a group like the Lashkar-e-Taiba?
Because I think the very strong conviction in the military and the intelligence and other elements within the society is that they're not a threat to us, namely Pakistan. They're a threat to India. And by doing what they're doing to turn away from LET and others, they continue to cause India to have to take them seriously or have to worry about Pakistan. Those days should be over. I mean, that's ancient history. Part of what I see as I go around the world are people who are imprisoned by the past and people who are moving toward the future, facing the problems that they have, whether it's poverty or disease or conflict, whatever it is. And Pakistan has not made its decision to do that yet.
Who's accountable for that? You said elements in the military intelligence establishment. Is it the Pakistan army at the very top? Is it something that's happening at the middle rung? Where does the buck stop?
Well, we certainly never had any evidence that it went to the very top, but that may or may not be true. But we did have evidence, which we did present on several occasions, that there were both retired and present active duty military and intelligence officers whose job it was, or at least as they defined their job, to tend to keep an eye on, certainly, but to, in effect, protect the extremist groups. The Haqqani Network, one of the most vicious extremist groups around. They operate openly. Now, Mullah Omar is in Pakistan. You go down a long list of terrorists who threaten Afghanistan and threaten India, and by extension threaten the United States and our forces and the forces of our allies in Afghanistan. But I believe that oftentimes it's the attitude taken at the very top is, don't tell me, give me deniability. If President Zardari calls me in and says, who do you think killed my wife? I have to be able to say, sir, I don't know. I have no idea. Or if you get called in by another civilian official who is saying the Americans say that there's a training camp and they are going to, take action if we don't take action. Well, we'll look into that. I mean, it's
creating plausible deniability.
It's creating plausible deniability. That is my view. And I personally deeply regret. I'm distressed by what I see happening inside Pakistan, because there's no doubt they've lost tens of thousands of civilians and soldiers in attacks. I mean, the last count when I left office was more than 30,000